Greetings, welcome back to Pink Oddbird. Today I'm here to do a little golden book journal tutorial for you, and I hope that you will find this tutorial helpful. And I'm going to do this in a way so that hopefully if you're making one of these, you can kind of do it along with me and pause as you need to, and then move on to the next step from there. And I do believe that this video is going to be my very first YouTube premiere video where we are able to do live chat down in the chat section when this video first premieres. So if you're here for that premiere, I hope we're all having fun down there chatting away. Or if you're watching this video in the future, thank you for joining us, and I do hope that you'll leave a comment down below letting me know what you think of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started. So what did you guys think about that? Is it odd bird enough for you? All right, here we go. So I have two little golden books here. I'm probably going to do both of these at the same time, but in the video, you'll probably only see me working on one of these. Behind the scenes, I will be doing this in tandem. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick one of these. So as you know, this is kind of the format of how the little golden books come. So the first thing that I'm going to just do is start. You can use something to help you pry this back. I just kind of like to start lifting it little by little. There's going to be some staples in here. I think there's two sets of staples, so one at the top, one at the bottom. So I'm just going to start going on either side, lifting, and you'll see that this is coming up really easy. So knowing that there are staples in here, just be careful of that. So there's one side, and then, ooh, there we go. So easy hazy. All right, so here is my, or here are my little signatures. And I'm just gonna set these off to the side for now. And what I wanna focus on is getting these, well, the staples are in here, and actually I don't need to really worry about them too much. Where the, well, in this case they're silver. It looks silver anyway, unless it's really faded gold. But we're gonna cut this piece off anyway. Oh, my nail's kind of cutting it. And this piece off here. So right where that, where the gold ends, that's where we're gonna go ahead and cut this down. I'm gonna use my box cutter. You can use an X-Acto knife or anything like that, but just follow the guide and cut straight down. And so this is what we have. This is going to be trash. So I'm just going to kind of clean this up a little bit more. This is what we're left with, right? So we still need a spine, don't we? Before we move on, a side note, this one, removing this one is not as forgiving as the other one was. So you do want to, I think I can see that this one is a little older, I think. So I am gonna use something to help me get this off, because this one is not being as easy as the other one, and I assume that you all may have one or some that are like this as well. So I'm just pressing down on the pages carefully and then using my thumb to press down where that golden edge is here, carefully so that I don't tear the pages. And I can see the staples are coming out here. All right, and then same thing on this side, just pressing and pulling gently until you're in a position where you can get those staples fully out of the cover. There we go. Okay, so for our books, we're gonna need some spines. And I have some chipboard here. And this chipboard is like a medium chipboard. So it is just about the same flexible and width of the actual little golden book. So I'm just looking, because if you have a piece of chipboard that is thinner than your book, you're gonna wanna double it up because it won't be sturdy enough. But if you have one that is about the same thickness of the cover, then you're golden. See what I did there? And if your chipboard is too thick, like if it's wider than the width of this piece of chipboard here on the actual book cover, I am not sure that I would use that, just because, you know, it needs to be kind of flush. So this is flush. So I'm gonna stick with this piece, I think. Let's see. I guess we should talk about spine width. Okay, this is 2 inches. And I kind of like 2 inches for this, because I'm gonna do 3 signatures in my books. So you can do your width to how many signatures you're gonna do, but I'm doing 3 signatures. So I'm gonna take a 2-inch piece, and I need to find my height. So the height of this cover is 7 7/8, I believe is what that is called. So let me show you. So what I'm gonna do is, because we already know the little golden book pages are the right height, I'm really measuring this for my spine and for my knowledge of what my height of my pages need to be. And if you're not sure about it, all you have to do is line this up with your book cover, line it up together, and I'm gonna make sure they're staying together. Draw a line here, and that's where we're gonna cut this down. So taking my box cutter now and following the line that I made. Okay, so we've got that. And then I do kind of want to clean up this little edge piece here from whatever I did last. So I'm gonna just clean that up as well. All right, so here it is, 7 7/8 by 2 inches. So this is gonna become our new spine pretty soon. I do want to say, when you're cutting out your spine, if you're using like a box cutter or X-Acto knife, 2 things I want to say. The first one is, use your ruler. You can use the metal edge of your ruler if it has one to line it and then trace it. If you need extra guidance, don't be afraid to do that. And the second thing is, when you're using your cutter, just lightly get a cut into where your line is. Don't try and cut it on the first pass, because that's not really possible. So give it a few passes and just take your time, and you'll get it cut out exactly straight how you need it to be. All right, the next step is Tyvek. I work in an office, so I usually like to take a little prowl around and check the recycle bins. You can find a lot of like old or soon to be recycled Tyvek envelopes if you are, you know, into upcycling and things like that. or you can also pick this up at like Staples or Office Depot, stores like that. So I have my spine here, and all I'm gonna do is take this piece of Tyvek and just cut it in half. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight or anything like that. Just cut it in half. The next thing that I'm gonna do is cut these pieces down to the same height as my, maybe just like a hair shy of what my spine is. For the next step, you can use glue or you can use double-sided tape. I'm going to use my tape. So wherever you see me put tape is what you can also do with glue. So on the edges of my spine, I'm just going to add some tape here and here and here and here. If you are using tape, you definitely want to make sure you burnish. Where's my bone folder? I'm sure I grabbed it. Here it is. You just want to make sure you burnish. And then if you're using glue, you'll do one of these at a time. So you'll do glue and then glue on one of the edges and then stick these together. I'm going to use my tape. Okay, so I'm going to take the tape off one side here and do the same on one side of my Tyvek. And I'm just gonna basically sit this down just like so. All you have to really do in that step is just make sure that there's enough Tyvek on this spine and make sure that, yeah, you just glue it down really well. That's all you really have to do on this step. So I'm going to take this side off, and I need to add my Tyvek to this one, or my tape to this one. So this is what we have. So if you've taped it or glued it down right, there should be no real like space here for you to like lift up anything. Okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen. So like I said, this is what we have. We have about at least 3/4 inches to about an inch on either side here of these little wings. So now we're gonna take our cover, and this is where you gotta make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing. So here is our spine. It is laid with the edge of the spine where you can feel the ridge face up, okay? Face up. So here is the front of our book. Theodore Mouse up in the air. Here is the back with all the characters. So we know, you can double check this. You've got your back on the right hand side, your spine, your front cover on the left hand side. So you know, imagine your book is open just like this. If you close it, that's going to be your front cover, okay? So just make sure you don't get those mixed up. All right, so the next thing to do, I'm gonna just trim down any excess. I've already kind of laid my tape down for this side of the of the wing. So I'm just going to trim it down quickly here, just because I don't really need any of that excess after where my tape is. Okay. All right, so here we go. All right, now on my book cover, on the back spot, on the back cover, I'm gonna run a little piece of tape from here to here. If you're gluing, you're gonna want to run a bead of glue right along that edge, okay? So I'm gonna remove my tape. I'm gonna move this out of my way. If you are gluing, you're gonna run a bead of glue right along this edge, all right? So I'm just using my little board here to make sure that I am straight. This is very straight. And when you're laying down your back cover, you wanna make sure you leave at least like 1/4 of an inch for where your book is gonna fold. Everybody does that part different, but that's kind of what I do for these covers anyway. So I'm just gonna set, well, I probably need to remove the tape here to make sure that it sticks. So I'm gonna make sure this stays still. And then I'm just gonna line this up with the line that's going right here. I'm gonna line it up and set it down. Perfect. Now, I'm just gonna turn it over and burnish this tape down to make sure that it stays. So there we go. Okay. Now we're gonna repeat with the front cover. Since my back cover is already on, I know that that's the back. I'm left-handed, so everything's kind of weird for me. So I'm just gonna take everything and flip it upside down. So I'm going to add my tape here and make sure that I turn it back upside down, okay? So I'm gonna take the tape off and remove my tape here. Make sure that I am lined up down here at the edge where my board is. And to make sure everything is really good and straight. So here we go. And lay it down. So now we not only know that they're straight, but we know that we have the same amount of space here. Okay? So that's how we do that part. All right, we're coming along here. All right, so here is where we're kind of at so far. This is what your cover should look like. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do is pick out a fabric that matches with the cover that you're doing. And this is the fabric that I've chosen. I thought the colors kind of complemented the front cover really nicely. So, I do have a rotary cutter somewhere. Who knows where, but grab your ruler again. And we just want to get an idea about how wide this piece is that we're going to need to cover. So on the spot, it's 3 3/4. So I think I would cut about a 4-inch piece. A 4-inch piece, yeah. And I am happy with how much of the cover that will be covering. If you cut your fabric too wide, you're going to start cutting into more of your image. So 4 inches wide is how I'm going to cut my piece of fabric. So here's what I have so far. This is going to be way easier if you do have your rotary cutter, but such is life. So I'm just going to put this down at 4 inches. And I'm just going to make a little mark over here. And then I know it's straight right here, so I'm just gonna put my ruler down where my line is and line it up on my board where I can see that the line is straight, like so. Ugh. Okay, and then I'm just gonna sketch out a line for me to cut. Now you can back this with heat and bond if you want to. I'm not gonna do that today just for the sake of time and this tutorial, but you absolutely can back this with some heat and bond. So there's 4 inches wide. Now we can make sure that it's gonna cover. Yes, it is. Also, you can iron. I'm not doing that either. And you see how we have just a bit left over the top and the bottom here? That's perfect. You have about 3/4 on the top and 3/4 on the bottom, and that's exactly what we want. So next, I'm gonna take my handy dandy Fabri-Tac glue, which is a fabric glue if you do not know already. Oh, actually, before we do this, I want to just fringe out the edges on this, and it might not matter. It depends on how I feel, but you have to do this before you glue it down because there's no way to really do it afterwards. And what I mean is sometimes it depends on if I might add like an additional trim here, so you might not see the frayed edge anyway, but I might also decide not to add an additional trim there, and in which case you will see the fringe. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing your little fabric piece here. So now that we've got the edges frayed, I'm just gonna line my book up again here on the board, make sure it's straight, and I'm gonna start gluing. So I'm just gonna start up here at the top, and I'm just gonna glue from Tyvek across the top to the edge of Tyvek. All right, so I've got glue down there, and I'm just gonna line this up as straight as I can and make sure I have enough at the top and bottom to fold over, and start burnishing this down. And you want to make sure you really get the edges, because if they lift, you'll see that Tyvek underneath. So definitely make sure you get your edges. Okay. And I'm lucky this time. None of that glue seeped through, so awesome. And you can't tell it was wrinkled. Okay, so moving on. I'm gonna do the lower half now, making sure I go from edge to edge and get in here where I've previously glued down. Oop! Good thing it's already glued on the top. All right, there we go. Now I'm just gonna burnish all this down. Perfection. All right. Now we're gonna flip-er-do, and I'm gonna just do a little glue here. This flap down and it stays down. Okay. So I'm just pulling it over like so. And adhere. Okay. I'm going to use my burnishing tool. to really get this in here. Okay. And repeat. Okay, so here's what we've got. Here is the other book cover that I am also doing. And on this one, I just wanted to say that I did not fray the edges on this fabric because I know that I'm gonna put a trim here. So, you know, no two books are ever really the same. So if you go in knowing what exactly what you're gonna do, then, you know, work that way. If you're trying to leave your options open, you know, do that too. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is get something to cover up this, and I'm going to use cardstock. So I just have some Recollection 65-pound cardstock here, and I'm just gonna pick a piece, and then I know that the cover height is 7 7/8, so I'm gonna take my paper trimmer and cut the paper height. I don't want to cut it exactly to 7 7/8 right at, you know, right on from Jump Street, just because sometimes your trimmer could be off, sometimes your measurements could be off, and then if you measure it wrong, then you're stuck with a piece of paper that doesn't really work for what you're doing. So see here, I cut this piece at 8 inches. Or what it looks like 8 inches on here. So, and it's pretty darn on it. I'm gonna cut just like a sliver of a hair off of this. I don't even know if I really should. Let me look at this. Honestly, it really needs like a sliver of a hair to be cut off, but I hope I don't regret this. It's not the end of the world if you mess up, but it's so much better when you're right. Okay, so I like literally this is all I just cut off, a sliver. So that I think should be perfect. Yeah. Perfect. And just see how, well, I know, let's see, the fabric is 4 inches. So I'm thinking about, I'm gonna start with the 5.5. Now let's see what this looks like. Perfect. So we're not covering up the little golden book sentiment here, and the back is even. So that looks good. Now we have choices. Oop. We can also drop our paper. Okay. So we know this piece is going to cover here. Now, if you know that you want to add some trim here, you don't have to do this part. Or if you want to use fabric here instead, just cut your fabric. You can cut this and then actually just trace around on your fabric with this size, and you can use your fabric here on the inside cover. The choice is yours. You don't have to do it my way. I am giving you different options for however it suits you best, or however you prefer your book to look. So if you would rather see fabric here, by all means, like, use this as a template and cut your fabric down to size and use fabric here. I'm going to punch the edges. My edges are punched, and all that's left now is for you to adhere your paper or fabric to the book. And like I said, for this, you can use glue or tape. Either one is fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and grab my glue, and I am gonna use Fabri-Tac for the reason being that this is paper and this is fabric, and I wanna make sure that those two stick together. So Fabri-Tac is my best bet for that. So I'm just gonna glue it down. Here we go. Now before this gets all the way adhered down, I want to recognize where my book's gonna fold and get that pressed in there. And then we're gonna go ahead and burnish the rest of it for a nice flush. So that's how it looks so far. Now, before I give this a fold, I'm gonna let it dry just a little bit. Now that it's had a couple minutes to dry, I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a fold and give it a fold. Now, this cover is just about fully ready. I won't probably do the, I decided that I probably will put trim here. I won't do that until later. So I think at this phase, we're ready to go ahead and start working on the signatures. So we're ready to resume with the next portion, which is the signatures. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be doing 3 signatures for these books. And one thing that I didn't tell you in the beginning, haha, tricky. So this is for the people who are watching the tutorial in full, is the first thing that I think about when I'm thinking about which little golden books I want to work on is what my covers look like and what the insides of the paper look like. What do they look like? What's the story? What's the color scheme? And the reason why I do that is because that tells me which paper I want to use. So if I'm thinking, oh, I want to do this little golden book, but I don't have paper to match, then that's probably going to mean that I need to go buy some paper, which is something that I don't want to do. So I'm trying to make a book or two using paper that I already have existing. And I almost, because I originally was planning to do a different theme, but I don't have the book yet, and it's one that I had to buy because I really wanted it, and so it won't be here until Monday, so I needed to do this now. I found this paper pack and I almost didn't see it, and this one came from Crafty Irena, and she sent this to me in some Happy Mail. So Irena, thank you so much, you saved the day. And so when I realized that I had this paper, that's when I chose those books. So I feel like the paper really coincides with the color schemes that are in both of those books. So I'm happy about this. This is K & Company paper, and it is double-sided, which I love. So here is kind of what the paper looks like. It's very beautiful. So I'm not gonna go too in depth with how I put the signatures together for these, because if you're an odd bird watcher, then you already know that I have recently done a tutorial on how I do my signatures. So if you want something that's really in depth, and focused on signatures, I will link that video in the description box down below so you can pop over and get the real in-depth portion for how to put your signatures together. Meanwhile, here, all I'm going to do is give you the basics for what I need for these little golden books in particular and go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by picking out some papers. All right, so we've done a pretty nice little bit of damage to this paper pack, which is always fun. Okay, so I'm just gonna set it aside, and I have all the papers that I've chosen here. Now, what I want to tell you about these before we go any further is, like I was mentioning before we started, I know that the book is 7 7/8, so I'm going to cut all of my pages down to somewhere in between 7 3/4 and 7 7/8, like right in between those two, just because I don't want my pages to be too tall and I don't want them to all be too short. So you can cut them at exactly 7 7/8 if you're confident in your paper trimmer. Otherwise, you can give yourself some leeway either way. So let's go ahead and start cutting these down. One thing I forgot to mention, we need to know the width of our pages, don't we? So the width of our pages, actually, I forgot to mention this in the beginning. The pages are actually going to be a little bit bigger than the covers now because we've taken off that extra little golden spine, right? The spine that used to be like right here is gone. So as you can see, the pages will stick out, which is okay. However, we do want to cut down the rest of our pages to match what the cover is now. So I'm just going to take my ruler and measure. So it's about 6 1/8 inches. So I believe I'm gonna just cut them at 6 and we'll see how that looks. Sorry, I forgot to mention that sooner. So 7 7/8 approximately by 6. So my pages are already 12, so I'm gonna leave these as is. And then when we get to folding the signatures, if I need to cut them down further, I will. Okay, so I've got most of these cardstock pages cut down to the sizes that I believe I need, and then I've left them at 12 inches, and I'm not sure yet, but I have a small inkling that I might need to cut them down a little bit more, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. So I'm gonna set those aside, and then I also have some other papers here that I would like to incorporate. I've got cardstock. I have some just coffee stained paper. I've got some graph paper, lined paper, ledger paper, steno paper, some little this and that, music paper, book pages, recipe pages, lined music sheets, magazine pages, and children's lined pages, and a couple more book pages. So these are the kinds of papers that I'm going to be also cutting down to the same size. And I haven't really thought about how many. Well, I guess I kind of have thought about. There's usually about 8 pages per signature, and I'm going to do 3. So I don't really know how many all this is, but I will say that I'm going to cut everything down, and I will do some of the coffee stain papers, but not all of them, because I'm not sure if I'm going to need all the coffee stain papers. So I'm going to save cutting those for last. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I think I've got most of my pages cut down here to the right height, and I'm going to keep my paper trimmer local so that I can trim down as needed. And I've got these scraps off to the side because I'm going to use these as well. So here is my lot of paper. It's the cardstock and all of the other kinds of pages that I've shown you. So I'm going to now start organizing the signatures. You will notice that I did do duplicates, and because again I'm doing 2 books, so I'm going to make sure to separate that off to the side so that you don't get confused. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with putting my signatures together, and I am going to do this in a little bit kind of like sped up, because like I mentioned before, if you want the in-depth conversation about signatures, I'll link that video for you. Okay, so now that we have the 3 signatures all put together with all of the pages that I had pulled out previously, the next thing that you're going to do is take the signatures from your little golden book and incorporate these pages into the signatures. And it's personal preference, so however you choose to do that is the way to go. Like, you can put them back in to your signatures in order. Personally, I don't really care about that. It's not going to be in story context for me anymore if I don't want it to be. So I'm just going to start putting these into the book however I see fit. And that could be in order or it could not be. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, now that we've got the pages incorporated into the signatures, the next step is again, personal preference. So this part kind of depends on how your book pages are, what your book pages look like. So for example, if I want to just leave this page how it is and just fold it in a bit so that it matches to the 6-inch width that I have. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, I probably should make sure that the signatures are okay at 6 inches, and yeah, it looks like they are. So what I'm looking at is not the little golden pages. I'm looking at the pages that I cut down to 6 inches, or the pages that were folded at 6 inches, and they are within the cover. So perfect. Okay, so that's fine. Sorry. Okay, so again, so for example, I'm going to show you on this signature. I'm just going to fold these pages in a little. You see? So it gets completely absolved into the book. Now, if you have pages on your book pages where you feel like you can cut some of the pages down to size without losing any of the integrity of what's on those pages, then by all means do that. If you prefer to fold them in like I did, do that. So again, like I said, personal preference. So I'm going to go through and just fold and or cut my pages down. Now that I've got all of the book pages incorporated in, the next thing that I'm going to do is just double check how this looks. Pretty darn good. Okay, so there's not really very much overhang at all. I might cut a couple of these down just a teensy bit. Yeah, a couple of them. And then we're good to move on to the next step. I should not fail to mention that you also do want to double check that everything looks good as far as the height goes in your book. You don't want any pages that are too long, and it looks good from what I can see. So we're ready to move on to the next step in this book. So before I take these pages over to my machine and do a little bit of sewing detail, I am going to incorporate some of those little pieces, cut off pieces that we have here on the side. So maybe just like one per signature. So I'm going to just randomly pick out 3. There's 2 and 3. And then I'm just going to cut them down just a little so they're not going to be exactly 6 inches. They'll be just under once folded. And then I'm just going to fold these and add them into each signature. Oh, there's 3. Okay. So I'm just going to pick a spot where I feel like these need to go, and that's where they're going to go. I'm going to hop off and do a little bit of sewing detail, and then we'll come back and get these signatures sewn into the cover. And we are back. So I went ahead and I did a little bit of sewing detail in the book. So I am at the phase where we're ready to get the signatures sewn in. If you're interested in seeing the full process for how to get your signatures in a straight line, I'm going to link to Liesl, who is DidSomebodySayPaper. She has a tutorial on how to perfectly line up your signatures, and her method is the one that I use. So here I have my template, and I do want to make some kind of a mark so I know where the toppity top is. So, all right, so I have my template. Now I'm going to go ahead and start preparing the book base. So I'm going to do this kind of sped up. So Yep, you guys can watch along, and we will reconvene when it's time to get the signatures sewn in and I have the buttons on deck. So here we go. All right, I've got the holes punched. I have my template here. I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping for getting the first signature sewn in. All right, so I'm going to start with my third signature and just run through it to make sure it looks good and fresh. And it does. Okay, so I like that. I'm gonna make sure that everything is lined up on the corners here, or on the edges, and clip this down. Take my template, line it up, and get the holes punched through. All right, so I'm going to take the signature and start sewing through. Now for buttons. This is where it gets fiddly diddly, and how many buttons you do, really, it's up to you. There's no like set thing. So I thread it through the button and then back down through the other hole, and then I just slide it down a bit, and I might do, like, you can do different sizes. So if I want to do like maybe a clear one, sometimes the holes on these are smaller than your needle. Well, that one worked. If it's too small at this point, what you would have to do is take the needle like off the you know, thread. And feed the thread through the button, and then you know, I can't do two things at once, apparently. So I'm just sliding the buttons down a bit to make sure that I don't, see if I can show you. So I'm just sliding the buttons down a little bit here. They are kind of adjustable, but I just want to make sure they're not going to get in my way when I thread back through this hole here. Can you see that? I hope so. So I'm going to go back through. And you want to take a look and make sure they're not going to be completely flush at this phase, but you just want to make sure they're not like turned around upside down, because that would be a problem later. All right. So now that we're back through, you might want to add, say, one more here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Thread it through. Thread it through. And I'm cool with that. So then, of course, we take it right back through that last hole there. You guys know how this goes, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so there's what we have so far. Like I said, we can adjust these around in a bit. So I'm going to keep going. I guess I can finish this signature, but I will probably do the rest kind of separate, standalone-ish. Okay. So let's get a button here, thread it through, and back through. Cool. All right, so you definitely want to start making sure that your signatures are getting sewn in snugly. All right, I'm going to slide that down so I can get back through that hole. I hope I'm explaining this properly and clearly. Okay, so I'm going to pull this one tight and then slide these down a bit because they're kind of in my way. So I'm going to go back through that center hole. And there we go. Whew, okay, so, oops. I'm just going to make sure that everything is pulled snugly here and take one last look at it before I tie this off in a knot. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, we're ready to move on to the next. So here we go. Here I have a button. Let me see if I can get closer. One of these buttons won't fit through, so I have to take the needle off and thread this through, up, and I slide it down a bit, and then I go back down through a different hole, a diagonal one. Okay, and then put the needle back on. Actually, I might do one more. Yeah, I'm gonna do one more. Up, slide it down, down, through a different hole, and shimmy them along the thread a bit. And then I'm gonna put my needle back on. And now that I've done that, I'm going to proceed with threading it through the bottom hole here. So here we go. Checking to make sure that everything looks good here. I'm just gonna shimmy these around a bit. Okay, and then we're gonna go back through that same hole. Okay, and now that I've gone through there, I'm gonna pull it taut and then just slide this button where I want it to be. I apologize, the view is probably not ideal, but I'm trying my best. Okay, back through, actually before I go back through the center, there we go, I'm gonna do one more button. So hopefully you can see this good. I'm gonna go up through the button, slide it down, down through the button, pull it through, and then, oh, I didn't even have to take my needle off for that. That was a big button, but that's okay. And then back through the center we go. And boom. Boom, boom, boom. Perfect. All right, so I hope you guys are getting the hang of it. I'm gonna finish this one off and then move on to the final signature, and then we'll come back. Here we are, all done, almost. Of course, now you have to go through and flatten out all of your pages one by one, as per my previous video that I mentioned, that I linked. So you definitely just want to go through it and make sure these are all flattened out, so which I will do here in a second. But I want to show you, this is what the spine looks like. And all of my buttons are on here, all really nicely and snugly. If you can see this, there's like really no you know, loose signatures or anything like that. So I hope that that part was helpful for you. Okay, so I've gone through, spread out all of the pages. As you can see, oh, I forgot, the moment of truth. Did I get all of the signatures in straight this time? Yes! All right, the signatures are straight. I am happy to report the signatures are straight. So, as you can see, nice and flush. I did leave lots of space, so these signatures can get pretty fat with, you know, your own memory keeping. And I'm going to go ahead and just do the rest off camera, the last like little details. And I will come back and do a final flip through of both of these books. So if you have made it this far, I really do appreciate you hanging in there. I know this was a long video, but I was really trying my best to get this all done, at least the base of it, like this whole structure and, you know, this part and the buttons. I was trying to get all of that done in one video. So success. I'm gonna go ahead and get going. And so again, if you have hung out this long, I appreciate it and I thank you. And if you guys have any questions about anything that I did, make sure that you ask down in the comments below. And if you're on the premiere, be sure to ask me while we're here all together. So I appreciate everybody hanging out, and I think we're gonna go ahead and go now. This is the longest video ever, so that is going to wrap it up for me for now. Be sure to stay tuned, because you never know what direction this odd flock of ours is heading into. And until next time, toodaloo.